Hello, I'm George Abernathy. I'm the proud president of FreightWaves, and welcome to Supply Chain Spotlight. I'm really excited to have a former coworker, someone who I have had the opportunity and pleasure of being able to work with in our times gone by, and he's clearly lapped the field within that regard and what he's done since we worked together. But I'm joined today by Pervinder Johar, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Blume Global. Pervinder, thanks for doing this. It's going to be a lot of fun.
No, good to be able to do it with you, George. Kind of 20 years later, we're still talking about same topics.
It's exactly right. It's remarkable, and actually we can sort of start off, and I'll just say, Pervinder's had a remarkable career in leading a number of different software companies, the development of software, and I really think that your comment about it's been 20 years since we were together, that the last couple of years, and really your time at Blume, has seen an evolution unlike we had seen previously. So let's sort of talk about that. I know we're going to talk about domestic intermodal logistics and your background, the background of Blume, from the heritage that Blume had, really has the opportunity to speak to that in a way that's more relevant than anybody else. So let's start off with the domestic market. What are your customers saying to you as they're trying to adapt their domestic, intermodal supply chain, and what are the major pain points right now?
I think if you look at it, right, and it across all of supply chain, all modes of transportation, the customers want an Amazon-like experience. Right? So they want a digital experience. Right? So for our customers, their customers are demanding that. They want to know how long will it take for their goods to get from origin to destination, what the visibility is, kind of how do I become more transparent, more resilient. So that's the first area that our customers are demanding. Right? So our customers are demanding that. So it's kind of second one is this whole notion of digitization. We'll talk more about COVID later, but it has been that kind of elimination of paper, making sure that all of their internal operations are digitized is the second part kind of the work. But the third, which has been kind of little bit unique for the intermodal market, right? And then if you can remember going back to when we did it for the truckload market with the micro map, figuring out how do I assign a driver to an asset, or how do I assign a power unit to a load. All that work that was done for truckload market, surprisingly, when I got back into it 3 years back, right, had not been done for the intermodal market, which also is asset heavy, and then you've seen all type of asset shortage. And so the third area that our customers are looking at is this asset optimization, real-time visibility into assets, and how do I maximize utilization of those assets. But at the high level, those are the three. And so their customers demanding Amazon-like experience, a digital operating platform, and then the third is just how do I get kind of visibility into the asset side of my business, and how do I optimize it.
It's fascinating, and I'll dig deeper into, and you really strike a chord with me, as you know, and you talk about optimization and the things that have occurred over decades on the over-the-road market. But you mentioned COVID. It's a circumstance that was dealt with in 2020 as we work here into 2021, hoping that we're going to see us getting past this white swan, black swan event. But what challenges in particular did you see of any of those three, or were there specific to COVID challenges that your customers saw within the intermodal and maybe even outside of the intermodal marketplace?
I think for most part, right, all three of those areas were impacted. As you know, in technology adoption, especially for businesses, the inertia plays a big role. And so there's always kind of that you have to prioritize kind of digitization. The priority level for digitization just went through the roof, because there were customers who used to be that I have a dispatch office and people can go to work and they have their desktops, or they can make phone calls, and kind of here in one day in March, everyone had to go home. And if you were not digital, you were not using mobile compute, and you saw it kind of even outside of logistics. You saw the demand for laptops went up significantly after March, which was all kind of that COVID kind of acted as an accelerator in all three of those areas. And then if you think of intermodal transportation in particular, and then we look at intermodal as a couple of different ways. One of them is that you have marine intermodal and you have domestic containerized ports, right? Those two intersect. And we have seen kind of the demand for those containers went up, right? So right now we're dealing with shortage of kind of containers for export. You saw in between kind of the surge that happened kind of in LA Long Beach area. There were all type of asset shortage. So again, kind of that area was impacted. So I will say, George, that all three of them kind of played a significant role during COVID, and all of this actually accelerated the adoption by at least 3 to 5 years of these technologies.
That's amazing. It's consistent, Pervinder, with what we've heard from other leaders that, multiple years into the future has been pulled into 2020. Can you speak to how Blume is uniquely positioned to be able to provide the TMS services to the intermodal customers, and how that may have been pulled forward, and how you guys are ready to deal with that, compared to what others might be dealing with?
Sure. I think I kind of came in and we launched Blume in 2018, and so it's been 3-year journey now. So a lot of R&D investment to go build a platform, but the reason we did that no one had actually designed a system in the past grounds up for intermodal or for multimodal. Right? There were a lot of systems that got done for domestic truckload market. Right? There were parcel execution systems. Right? And I think I'd compared in another call that it's like a hodgepodge of systems that were built in, where we were trying to force fit intermodal into something that it wasn't really designed for. Right? So, and our legacy was with Reg 1 and with IAS, meaning that kind of since 94, we have been looking at domestic intermodal market. And so Reg 1 is part of Blume and Global. So we had access to kind of how that market works on behalf of Class 1 railroads. So we designed a system which was really meant for kind of the next 50 years. And then I think at Blume, you will hear it kind of like 20 years back, we did a platform which is still up and running, right? So if you think of it, so many of the customers are still using it. Blume was again the same notion that what do we need for the next 20 to 50 years? And the 3 or 4 key elements which were there. One, it's designed, as I mentioned, for intermodal. So it's not being force fit into intermodal. It is on the cloud, right? So runs on GCP, which is Google Cloud, did partnership with them. And it's truly a cloud native system in the sense that many people moved, but their older legacy systems were to the cloud, but did not really get any advantage of sharing of that data. And that sharing came from that network, that logistics network is actually fairly static around the world, especially in US. There are 6,900 kind of range motor carriers. We have connected now to 5,100 of them, which move about 85% of all intermodal transportation that moves in US on surface. We are connected. We're connected to all railroads. We're connected to all ocean carriers. So how do you go design a TMS which comes with kind of all of these things being there on day one? And I think can't share the name of the customer, but we were talking a little bit earlier. The projects that normally would have taken 3-4 years, now we can do them kind of between 3 months to 6 months, kind of on the Blume intermodal system. And all of that is possible because of not only the use of technology, but also the deep domain expertise that we had in the intermodal industry.
So let me tie a couple things together. You've said something that really fascinates me. sort of two swim lanes of trying to get to success are, or what we've talked about wanting to get to for all these years, are having the connections to the carriers, as you've described, having the 5100 and having 85% of the volume. So you're getting there in that swim lane. So then the next thing that we tend to talk about is, is transparency and visibility into that. So it strikes me that you've achieved or are on the way to achieving that first one, where you've got to get the connectivity, which then provides the opportunity for the visibility. Am I thinking correctly about that?
Yeah, and I think actually we have the visibility too, but we redefine that as well, George. Right? So, and then visibility has been a buzzword forever, right? So I remember there were companies that came out in 2000, 2001, 2. Most of them don't exist anymore, which were visibility only players. And the notion that has been there, and that visibility was about where is my trailer, where is my container, where is my shipment, right? Which is kind of almost, and then I compare it to kind of how if I am driving somewhere, I usually don't want visibility into where I am. And everyone, the visibility was talking about that, where am I, right? And then I think ours is back to, it's not about where you are, it's about when will you get there. And it's also about not kind of when you start moving, when you will you get there. It's before you start moving, can you predict how long will it take you? You'll be surprised that kind of there are very few places other than Blume where you can go get an interline schedule. And so we've been working with kind of like, so today, if you're on the intermodal side, right, there is no good kind of predictive ETA that goes across surface and rail, especially with rail, can when you have all of the junctions, right? So we did kind of this thing called location intelligence, where we know where every rail ramp is. We know kind of what happens kind of when you're in Chicago and you have to do a rubber town move to. But where I'm going to, that one part of visibility is knowing where your shipment is or container is. Second part is being able to calculate the ETA, knowing where you are and what are the characteristics of the traffic of the areas that you're going through. You will see a launch from us coming up in Q1 or so. Yes, I don't want to talk too much about it, which is all focused on this new notion of what's the map of the world, and how do you go and look at kind of the, especially for US, how do you look the map of the US, not from Google Maps perspective, not about the roads, but the map from locations perspective, and what actually happens at these rail ramps, what happens at these terminals, and how do I get transparency onto the locations, not just into kind of what my where my shipment is.
Wow, that's fascinating. So that leads me to Blume has established a goal of eliminating waste out of the global supply chain, $1 trillion worth of waste. So, as admirable as that is, and it certainly sounds like what you gave us some inkling on in Q1 around looking at those locations and seeing where the efficiencies or the inefficiencies are, that may be a little bit of a clue as to where some of those inefficiencies are. But what kind of wastes do you see your opportunity, Blume Global's opportunity, to eliminate from the supply chain?
Yeah. So I think so. We have looked at it across the world, right? So not just so U.S. Domestic market is a part of it, but I will give you an example for what's going on in U.S. today. So if you think of kind of the truckload market, we talked about it earlier. The focus was that you knew where your assets were, which were primarily power units and primarily drivers as your people asset, right? And how do I go optimize those assets and maximize the use of it? In intermodal market, what was missing in 2018 is real-time visibility into where your containers are. Not only full, but also empty. And if they are full, when will they be empty? And then it gets into the notion of that, can you really do a street turn? And I think there were a lot of challenges on that side too. So we actually had Boston Consulting Group come in, look at our data, worked at kind of like all of the data on US intermodal. And the notion we came up with that we think our platform can reduce empty miles by up to 58% in US. Right? Now, it is only unique for us because you need a lot of things to happen for it to happen. So first one is every single intermodal marketing company in US is connected to Blume platform today. Well, as you know, we do asset reservation. Right? So those asset reservation means that kind of we know when the reservation is made and we know when it is returned. We now also have raise companies which are connected, as we talked about, 85, 86% of the surface move on that side. And then you have visibility into those assets. And what we did was kind of it's the same playbook, number of PhDs who started working in 2018 on something called asset optimization. Right? We don't call it street turns anymore because street turns are too kind of passive or too reactive. Right? Kind of they are opportunistic. It is kind of at the last minute. It's more on think of techniques. So you probably know kind of I was the CEO of a company called Steelwedge, which was in demand and supply planning. So we used the techniques, which were a lot of AI and machine learning techniques, that how do I go do forecasting of where the asset is and where will it be, what the demand is for that asset, and what will be the demand be in future, and how do I do demand supply matching to take kind of up to 58% of empty miles just in US and Canada, right? Now, same thing we are doing across the world. So these numbers, we think kind of the $1 trillion is probably on the low end, kind of because there is just so much waste kind of in our ecosystem, and there's so much that can be done on a platform like ours over time.
That it would strike me that there's so much of that waste and the opportunity well beyond the $1 trillion that you're describing, that would be extraordinarily appealing to all of the different parts of the Blume global ecosystem, the shippers, the carriers, the railroads, all of them would seem to have that motivation to eliminate that waste, but you know, for the common good. But that also then says, I have more assets, more opportunity to do things, and it sounds like that's really uniquely a Blume kind of opportunity, isn't it?
It is, and I think part of the reason has been, George, that you need the network, you need the technology know-how, right? So kind of we had the technology know-how. So in 18, kind of had moved to the Silicon Valley kind of few years back after our days in Boston area. So we had built kind of a good network of the technologists, which became part of the solution. And so many things have to align right together. Right? So the history from Reg 1, our history of working with ocean carriers. So 4 of the top 6 ocean carriers are our customers. So we apply what we do for the domestic kind of container model also to the marine model, right, which gives you even more synergies, right? So there's a program we do which is called domestic reload on where how you can use a 40-foot container for domestic purposes. That's also on the platform. So many of these things were uniquely positioned for us that it's we've been fortunate enough to have kind of good customers who have supported us well, and then hopefully these relationships will continue and we can continue to provide value in the marketplace to take that waste out.
Well, I know from listening to the customer base that the value proposition is significant and they're getting it. Well, let's speak to that a little bit as we sort of draw to a close here. As we look in 2021 to, and it's an overused phrase, but let's call it the new normal. As you and your team are talking to your current customers or the prospects and the other people that you want and are looking to have within the Blume ecosystem, what should a company do in 2021 and beyond to best prepare, from your perspective, to succeed? I guess I'd say both in the domestic and that global marketplace to try to make certain what is clearly not certain today.
Yeah. I think, I can answer two different ways. Right? So one is kind of, we have done this product called Blume Universe, which is a supply chain orchestration and logistics orchestration product, right? Which helps you look at what your supply chain looks like, what your nodes are, kind of how are they moving, how you can do simulation, how you can be prepared for the changes. Yeah. And I think the other way is looking from more from technology perspective. A lot of what is in place today for transportation, right, is what I call deterministic optimization. So the techniques that had come up kind of for decades were all around deterministic optimization, kind of whether it was from MIT or Princeton or others, kind of all of the PhDs were all in deterministic optimization for most part. Where we have moved to now is probability-based model and being prepared to kind of react when things change on very quickly. So we've been using kind of these new techniques, and then I think we've been calling it that we are almost building a intelligent machine, right? Where we are moving to a time where the systems can make decisions versus the systems used to be decision support systems. When they're decision support systems and you get into a situation like COVID, there still is a heavy reliance and a reaction time for humans, right? So for companies to kind of think about as they go into 21 and future, is that how do you make that journey over the next 5 to 6 years where you're automating more and more of those decisions and you're relying on kind of the techniques we use are primarily neural networks and machine learning algorithms now, that how do you go and kind of predict what is about to come, which is what happened with COVID, and how do you get prepared for it and make the decision with keeping future in mind. So lot will change over the next few years, but the core of it is that just expect change, be prepared for that change in there, and make sure that kind of you're relying on a set of technology infrastructure which is able to make that decision, George, versus kind of just give you information where you're stuck kind of reacting to that information.
Wow. So, Pervinder, within the supply chain spotlight, I like to, in your case, having a relationship, love to get just a smidgen inside of the man that has taken the leadership position in so many of the companies that I've been so impressed with, and where Res 1 has moved from in 2018 to where you are today. It's just a remarkable journey for Blume Global. But I kind of want to get inside just your head just a little bit. So what's the best part of Pervinder's job? We work 24/7, 365 now, and I know Pervinder, you like that. That's a good thing in many ways. But what's the best part of Pervinder's job as being the CEO at Blume Global?
I think for me, I don't think it has ever changed, right? So when I came out of college, the first job I got was kind of distributed control systems for controlling nuclear power plants, and better make sure that they're perfect because you can't have any issue with those type of solutions. To financial services, to supply chain area, all of them have been that kind of how do we envision what the future can go look like, and then work hard to get and achieve it. Right? And so it's almost kind of my best part of my job has been kind of coming in 18, setting the stage of that what the future will look like, and as you know, even from my past, there always are a lot of people who can say why it can't happen. And my job is that how do I make sure that it will happen, and how do we make it happen. So I think I enjoy that the most, in addition to kind of running the company day in day out, which comes with all of its challenges and all of its rewards too. But the core of it is that we are trying to solve something very complex. It's at a global scale too. It's a problem worth solving. We talked about taking waste out, but if you just look at the environmental impact, and the human impact of what we are doing, it's significant. And so kind of, again, kind of at that stage in my career where we have to kind of make sure that I think my family thinks that I will be working for next 30 to 50 years. I was talking to my son last night. He says that, okay, I will probably be in my 60s before you retire. I said, okay. And then, and he wasn't born, he was just born kind of when we started working together. So, yes, you can. But he's thinking,
that's really wonderful.
How do we go leave a kind of a better supply chain for the next set of generations to come?
That's wonderful. Well, Pervinder, Supply Chain Spotlight is the kind of series that is really built to have folks like you, the leaders, the folks who have made a difference, and what you've constructed, what you and your team have constructed at Blume Global is really remarkable, and I look forward to seeing what 2021 and beyond has in store for Blume Global and for my friend Pervinder Johar, the Chief Executive Officer of Blume Global. Thanks for doing this. It was a great pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, George. Very good talking to you again, and we'll keep on talking.
We'll talk. I can't wait to do this again in another 3 years to see where you've taken the company. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Take care.